My name is Martha, and for 20 years, the closest my sister Carol and I ever came to a shared religion was the state lottery. I am 66 now, and Carol is 68, and for every one of those 1,000+ weeks, we had a pact, a sacred covenant made over lukewarm coffee 2 decades ago. We would play the same numbers every Wednesday and every Saturday. A combination of birthdays, anniversaries, and a lucky number from a long-forgotten fortune cookie. One of us would buy the ticket, but the understanding was as solid as bedrock. If we won, we would split it 50-50. It was a silly, hopeful ritual, a tiny anchor of shared dreaming in the choppy waters of our very ordinary lives. Carol and I were sisters, woven from the same thread, but the patterns of our lives had diverged. I had found a quiet contentment in a small pension and a love for my garden. Carol had always chased something more, a glamour that remained perpetually out of reach, leaving her with a string of debts and a quiet, simmering dissatisfaction. The lottery was our common ground, the one place our hopes could still meet. On a Tuesday in late autumn, I was the one who bought the ticket. I stopped at Chen's Variety, the small corner store I've frequented for 30 years. Mr. Chen, the kind, quiet owner, smiled as I filled out the familiar slip. "The usual, Martha?" he asked. "One day, this will be the one." I laughed, paid my $2, and tucked the ticket into the side pocket of my purse, a tiny paper vessel for a lifetime of wishing. That Saturday night, I was knitting in my armchair, the television murmuring in the background when the lottery drawing began. I barely paid attention, the ritual of checking the numbers usually a perfunctory, slightly disappointing end to the week. I pulled the ticket from my purse, my eyes scanning the screen with practiced indifference. The first number matched, a nice little coincidence. The second number matched. My heart gave a funny little flutter. The third, the fourth, the fifth, they all matched. A roaring sound filled my ears, the world narrowing to the glowing numbers on the screen and the flimsy piece of paper in my trembling hand. I checked again, and again, it was real. After 20 years of shared hope, our numbers, our sacred numbers, had come in. The jackpot was $50 million, a number so vast, so life-altering, it felt like a misprint. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then came the joy, a tidal wave of it, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. My first thought, my very first instinct, was Carol. I snatched the phone, my fingers fumbling with the numbers, and called her. The second she answered, the words tumbled out of me in a breathless, ecstatic torrent. "Carol, we did it, we did it. The numbers are numbers, they came in. We're rich." On the other end of the line, I heard a shriek of disbelief, then a whoop of pure, unadulterated joy that mirrored my own. We giggled and cried like schoolgirls, the phone line crackling with the energy of our shared disbelief. We started making plans, our words tripping over each other in our excitement. A trip to Italy for her, a new greenhouse for me, enough money to ensure our children and grandchildren would never have to worry about a single thing. $50 million, Martha, she kept screaming. Can you believe it? In that moment, sharing that impossible joy with my sister, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. I had my family, I had my health, and now we had a future free from all worry. I had the winning ticket, but the real prize, I thought, was sharing it with her. In the heady days that followed, a strange and unsettling quiet descended from Carol's end. My initial calls to discuss the logistics of claiming our prize went to voicemail. When she finally texted back, her messages were brief and evasive. "Just getting some legal advice lined up, Martha. Best to be careful," one read. Another said, "Things are a bit hectic. Let me handle the initial steps." I tried to quell the unease creeping into my heart. Of course, she was right. This was a monumental sum of money. Prudence was necessary, but her distance felt cold, unnatural. The warm, giggling sister from the night of the win had been replaced by a remote, businesslike stranger. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the shock of it all was making me anxious. I decided to give her space, to trust the bond we had shared for over 6 decades. A week after the win, I was sitting in my living room, sipping my morning coffee, when a local news teaser came on the television. "Coming up next," the anchor said brightly, "we'll meet the local woman whose life has been changed forever. The $50 million lottery winner is finally revealed." I smiled, assuming Carol had arranged this as a surprise, a grand public reveal for both of us. I leaned forward, my heart thumping with anticipation. The story began, and there she was. My sister, Carol sent. Standing at a podium in front of the Lottery Commission's headquarters, a giant novelty check in her hands. She was smiling, but her eyes, I noticed, looked haunted. The reporter approached her, microphone extended. "Carol, an incredible story. How does it feel?" It's a dream come true, Carol said, her voice trembling slightly. I've been playing these numbers for years. I bought the ticket last Tuesday on a whim, and I guess it was just my lucky day. My lucky day? Not our. The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor, but I barely noticed. The sound was drowned out by the cracking of my own heart as the reporter asked one final, devastating question. And what about the rumors, Carol? Your sister has apparently been telling friends that you two had an agreement to split the prize. Carol's face contorted into a mask of pained sorrow. She shook her head sadly. My sister, Martha. She's been going through a difficult time, she said, her voice dripping with false compassion. I love her dearly, but she's confused. When she heard I won, she got this idea in her head. It's a sad situation. I believe she's trying to extort me. Delusional, confused, and extortionist. I sat there, paralyzed amidst the shards of my coffee cup, as my own sister, my other half, painted me as a liar and a thief to the entire world, all for a prize that was half mine. The betrayal was so absolute, so profoundly cruel, it felt like a physical assault. The week that followed was the darkest of my life. The story was everywhere. My phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters, from curious old friends, from distant relatives wanting to know my side of the story. I didn't answer. I drew the curtains and locked the doors, a prisoner in my own home. My quiet, unassuming life had been turned into a public spectacle, and I had been cast as the villain. To see my own face on the news, a grainy photograph next to Carol's polished, sympathetic press conference, was a surreal and profoundly humiliating experience. The world didn't see a heartbroken woman who had been cheated by her sister. They saw a bitter, greedy old woman trying to steal her lucky sibling's fortune. Carol, meanwhile, was playing the part of the reluctant, gracious winner to perfection. She gave interviews about her humble plans, about the charities she might support. In every interview, she would add a somber note about the sad family situation, reinforcing her narrative of me as an unstable, grasping relative. She had not only stolen my money, she had stolen my name, my dignity, my truth. My children were furious, ready to wage war on their aunt, but I felt paralyzed by a grief that was deeper than anger. This wasn't a business dispute. It was a schism in my soul. The $50 million felt like a pittance compared to what I had truly lost, the simple, unquestioning belief that my sister loved me. I replayed our last joyful phone call over and over in my mind, searching for a hint of the treachery to come, but found none. The joy had been real, which meant the greed that followed must have been a force of nature, a sudden, monstrous tidal wave that had washed away 66 years of sisterly love in an instant. For days, I wallowed in that despair, feeling utterly helpless. How could I prove a verbal agreement? It was my word against hers, and she had already used the power of her position to frame me as a liar. And then, through the thick, gray fog of my sorrow, a single, clear image began to form in my mind. It was the friendly, smiling face of Mr. Chen. And just above his head, mounted on the ceiling of his small, cluttered store, was the little black dome of a security camera. A spark of hope, the first I'd felt in days, ignited within me. I threw on a coat and drove to Chen's Variety. The little bell above the door chimed as I entered, the sound a welcome note of normalcy in my upended world. Mr. Chen was behind the counter, and his warm smile faltered when he saw my face. "Martha," he said, his voice full of concern. "I saw the news. I am so sorry. It is a terrible thing." "Mr. Chen," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of desperation and newfound resolve. "You know me. You know I come in here twice a week, every week." "Of course," he said, nodding, "for 30 years. I bought the ticket here, Mr. Chen, last Tuesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. I was wearing my red coat." He looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, sorrowful understanding. He knew what I was asking. "The security cameras," he said quietly, "they record everything. But they only hold the footage for 2 weeks. It is a good thing you came today." He led me into the small, cramped office behind the counter. The air smelled of cardboard and tea. He sat down at an old computer, his fingers clicking methodically on the keyboard. He navigated to the security program, selected the date, last Tuesday, and scrolled to the 3 o'clock hour. And there I was. Footage was grainy, but the image was undeniable. It was me, standing at the counter, my red coat a bright beacon in the muted colors of the store. The camera angle was perfect. It clearly showed me filling out the lottery slip with the familiar numbers. It showed me handing it to Mr. Chen, him printing the ticket, and me paying for it. The time stamp at the bottom of the screen was a silent, digital witness to the truth. Mr. Chen zoomed in, and we could even make out the winning numbers on the ticket as it came out of the machine. "I remember," he said softly. "You told me your granddaughter had a piano recital that evening." He looked at me, his face a portrait of quiet indignation on my behalf. "Your sister, she should be ashamed." He downloaded the footage onto a secure flash drive and handed it to me. As I held the small, plastic rectangle in my hand, it felt heavier and more valuable than a brick of gold. It was my truth. It was my vindication. And it was the weapon I would use to reclaim not just my money, but my name. My first call was to a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Helen, who confirmed that the video evidence was, in legal terms, a silver bullet. She immediately filed an injunction with the State Lottery Commission to freeze the payout pending a fraud investigation. The legal wheels were turning, but for me, it wasn't enough. A quiet legal victory, months or years from now, would not erase the public humiliation. Carol had tried and convicted me in the court of public opinion, and that was the court where I wanted my appeal to be heard. I wanted the world to see the truth with the same clarity I had seen it on Mr. Chen's dusty monitor. So my second call was to Sarah Evans, the star investigative journalist for the very news station that had broadcast Carol's triumphant press conference. I left a message with her producer. "My name is Martha. I am the sister of the lottery winner, Carol. I have undeniable proof that she did not buy that ticket, and I am willing to share it with you exclusively." Sarah Evans called me back within 10 minutes. She was professional, cautious, her voice laced with the healthy skepticism of a seasoned journalist. I met her that afternoon in her office. I told her the whole story, from the 20-year pact to the final, devastating betrayal. Then, I slid the flash drive across her desk. She plugged it into her laptop, and we watched the footage together in silence. When it was over, she leaned back in her chair, a slow, wolfish smile spreading across her face. This wasn't just a he said, she said family squabble anymore. This was a story with a hero, a villain, and a shocking twist. It was a ratings goldmine. "This is incredible, Martha," she said, her journalistic instincts humming. "But to make it truly airtight, we need to corroborate the timeline." That's when I gave her the final piece of the puzzle. My phone records, showing a 2-minute and 47-second call made to my sister, Carol, at exactly 9:17 p.m. on the night of the draw, just moments after the winning numbers were announced. The phone records, combined with the time-stamped video of me buying the ticket, created an unbreakable chain of evidence. Sarah Evans leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "We're not just going to report this story, Martha," she said. "We're going to make this a special, primetime event. We'll invite your sister on for a follow-up interview, a celebration of her win. And then, on live television, we will confront her with the truth." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. It was a brutal, public way to seek justice, but Carol had chosen the arena. I was simply choosing the weapons. The trap was set with breathtaking efficiency. Sarah Evans's producer contacted Carol, inviting her for a special, primetime follow-up interview. The pretense was a soft-focus piece on her plans for the money, her new life, and her inspirational story. Carol, who had become quite enamored with her newfound celebrity and the fawning attention of the media, accepted immediately. She saw it as another opportunity to cement her status as the gracious, lucky winner and perhaps take another veiled, pitying swipe at her troubled sister. The night of the broadcast, I sat in a small, dark green room down the hall from the main studio, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could watch the live feed on a monitor. I saw Carol arrive, preened and polished, basking in the attention of the studio crew. She was wearing a new, ridiculously expensive-looking silk blouse, a purchase I thought bitterly that was likely made with the promise of my money. She looked every bit the part of the multimillionaire. I, on the other hand, felt small and invisible, a ghost waiting in the wings to haunt the feast. Helen, my lawyer, sat with me, her hand a reassuring presence on my shoulder. "You don't have to watch if you don't want to," she said gently. I shook my head. "I have to, I have." To see it through, the show began. Sarah Evans was a master of her craft, her introduction smooth and professional. She welcomed Carol, who beamed at the camera, a picture of poise and contentment. The first 10 minutes of the interview were exactly as promised, soft, flattering questions about her dreams and plans. Carol spoke of donating to a local animal shelter and maybe buying a small condo in Florida. She was weaving a beautiful narrative, a fairy tale for the entire nation to consume. Then I saw Sarah's expression subtly shift. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, journalistic focus. The trap was about to be sprung. "Carol," Sarah began, her tone becoming more serious, "I want to return to something you mentioned in your first press conference. This difficult situation with your sister, Martha." Carol's smile tightened. She sighed, a practiced, theatrical sound of sorrow. "It's been the one dark cloud in all of this," she said, shaking her head. "I love my sister, but I just don't know how to help her. She has this fantasy, this delusion. A delusion that you had a pact to share any winnings." Sarah interjected smoothly. "Yes," Carol said firmly. "A complete fantasy. I bought that ticket myself. My name is on the back of it, it's that simple." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes locked on Carol's. "Carol, we've been doing some follow-up research on this story, and we've uncovered some new information. We'd like to show it to you." On the large monitor behind Sarah's head, which had been showing a graphic of the show's logo, the image suddenly switched. It was the grainy, black-and-white footage from Mr. Chen's security camera. My red coat was a slash of gray against the background. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. "We have obtained security footage from Chen's Variety, the store where the winning ticket was purchased," Sarah said, her voice a calm, cutting narration over the video. "It's from last Tuesday at 3:12 p.m. As you can see, it shows your sister, Martha, purchasing the lottery ticket with the winning numbers." The color drained from Carol's face. Her polished composure dissolved in an instant, replaced by a mask of pure, panicked disbelief. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing every flicker of her terror. That doesn't prove anything," she finally stammered. "She buys tickets all the time. I must have bought mine later. "That's an interesting theory, Carol," Sarah said, her voice dropping for the final, devastating blow. "Except we also have your sister's phone records from the night of the win. They show an outgoing call from her phone to yours at 9:17 p.m., just minutes after the winning numbers were announced. A call that lasted for nearly 3 minutes. Was she calling to threaten you then, Carol? Or was she perhaps calling to share the wonderful news that your shared dream had finally, after 20 long years, come true? Trapped, exposed. The web of lies she had so carefully spun was torn to shreds in front of millions of people. There was no escape. The bright studio lights seemed to bear down on her, stripping away the last of her defenses. Carol's face crumpled. A loud, ugly sob escaped her lips. And on live, national television, my sister, the $50 million lottery winner, broke down and confessed everything. The aftermath was a swift and brutal landslide of consequence. The Lottery Commission, armed with Carol's on-air confession and the mountain of evidence, concluded their fraud investigation in record time. The legal battle was over before it even began. A judge invalidated Carol's claim, and the full, untaxed $50 million prize was awarded to me, the rightful and sole purchaser of the ticket. The court ruled that her fraudulent actions and public defamation had irrevocably broken our long-standing verbal pact, voiding any claim she might have had. Carol became a national pariah, a meme, a punchline on late-night talk shows. She was the woman who had tried to cheat her own sister on live television. She faced criminal charges for fraud, and the legal fees and fines consumed what little money she had. Her brief, glorious moment as a millionaire was over, leaving her with nothing but public shame and financial ruin. My name was cleared. I was no longer the delusional, grasping sister, but the wronged party, the victor in a story of jaw-dropping betrayal. The money, when it finally arrived in my bank account, was an obscene, incomprehensible string of zeros. I bought a new, comfortable house, set up trusts for my children and grandchildren, and donated a generous sum to the local hospital. I had everything I had ever dreamed of on that first, joyful night of the win. I had my financial freedom. I had my vindication. But my victory was a quiet, lonely affair. My sister and I have not spoken since the broadcast. I see her sometimes. In old family photographs, a smiling stranger from a life that no longer exists. The money is a powerful balm, but it cannot heal the amputation of a 66-year-old bond. Some nights, I sit in my beautiful new home, the silence far more profound than it ever was in my small, old house, and I think about our silly, hopeful 20-year pact. Our shared dream did come true. It just turned out to be a nightmare, and I am its sole survivor.